Hey, so I know I said I was going to do update videos more often, and then I just didn't for like 2 weeks. And I did go on vacation with my wife for about a week, and then I got pretty sick. But I'm extremely proud of what I've managed to accomplish um, for the game. I mentioned in my last video that I was possibly going to do a tutorial about composition, and I did. And holy hell, like I put a little information in there, but it was nothing. It was nothing compared to what I ended up doing, and I'm really proud of what I ended up doing. So, speaking of the composition, I've got this component manager now, and the idea of the component manager is that a lot of these components have to talk to the other components. So, for example, whenever you take damage, if your health drops to 0 or less than 0, then it needs to signal, hey, I've been destroyed. And the component manager will say, well, I have a destroyed handler, so call a destroyed handler. The destroyed handler can have an override in case, the enemy has special behavior when it gets destroyed. Maybe it doesn't actually destroy, and unless you kill all of the same types of enemy within 10 seconds, kind of like that second boss in Molten Core from way back in the day in World of Warcraft. I'm really aging myself, I think. But so the component manager is going to like handle all the communication, and then I have all the components, including the take damage handler that I created in that video. It's actually a little more complicated now, but it's awesome. And I'll just go through them really quick. So the take damage handler is very similar to where it was, although there's a really cool new thing I did with it that I'll talk about in a minute. The destroyed handler, movement handler. I'm proud of the movement handler because I don't want to like code movement for every single enemy when a lot of the movement's going to be similar. So if I look over here in the inspector, my lich, I plug the actor in because that's what you have to say, like actor dot move and slide, because it has to work on the actual character body 2D. And then there's the idle movement and then the combat movement. So when it's idle, I have this resource, this movement resource plugged in that basically just says pick one of 4 directions and go there at a certain speed, and you can plug in whatever speed you want here. And then when it's in combat, I have the exact same resource, it's just I plugged in a speed of 200. And then the component manager handles everything. I don't have to like handle whether or not it's in combat or it's idle. I can just have it work. Also, I know I look kind of like a ghost right now. I got a green screen, so you won't see all the stuff in weird, all the stuff in my basement. But I don't know. I think I need to like iron it or something, because all of the little creases and stuff are technically a different color, and so I have to like set up the. Doesn't matter. Point is, movement's awesome now. I also have, and it's just so easy to create new enemies and create new things. I have this aura handler. The idea for the aura handler is that it's your buffs and debuffs. So if you apply a movement speed debuff to an enemy, or an enemy has buffs itself for more damage and more movement speed for like 10 seconds, the aura handler handles everything. This basically maintains lists of all the auras, and then all of the other things check for those auras, for the aura types that matter to it, loops through them and applies those modifiers. So it's just buffs and debuffs. And then it came to AI. AI is complicated, and I asked on the Good O subreddit, and they said just use a state machine. And so I looked up some tutorials in state machines, and they're all very, very basic. It's great for like if your enemy has like 3 states and they can't be interrupted or anything. They just have to like constantly check whether or not they should switch to a different state. I needed something way more complicated than that, and I found one tutorial that was like, your states don't have to know which states to jump to. You can just jump back to your state manager, state machine main node, and just have the code there that determines which state to go to next. And I was like, yeah, I mean, if you're gonna have complicated code, you have to do that. But I also have like interrupting states, and the take damage handler can tell the AI handler, hey, you need to interrupt whatever state you're doing if it's an interruptible state. Things like that. I wanted to bake all of that code into what I was creating, and so I did. So the AI handler is just basically, it turns out it is basically just a state machine. It will sit here and it will decide what skills do I have available, what are the priority, which skill to jump into, and then it will trigger that skill. And then, like almost everything else, I've got, certain properties you can put in here. So this is like once it goes into combat, an initial half a second before it uses its first skill. In between skills, this is the minimum and maximum buffer time. So like a boss would have like almost 0 here, just skill, skill, skill. Whereas this lich I've created just needs to randomly shoot a fireball every 1.2 to 2.2 seconds. Speaking of which, that's where it actually gets A little more complicated. So I instantiate every skill that I can cast under the AI handler, and that's how it knows to see which skills it has available and how to do them. So in that case, I'm still sick. Sorry if I'm coughing into the mic. I have one skill called Cast Fireball. That's all this enemy has. And it basically determines how to do it. And then, like, if it's interrupted, there's an interrupted on interrupt base and cast by .interrupt cast. This stops it from actually finishing its cast. And that's it. What happens if you're in the middle of casting and you get hit? You obviously want to stop the cast for like a basic enemy, not for like a boss. But this is where I kind of went off the rails because I was trying to create something reusable. Like if I have a projectile, I don't want the projectile instantiated as a child of the Lich, because then when the Lich moves, it will move as well. I know you can detach it by putting like a buffer of just a node, not a node 2D, but just a node, because a node doesn't have position, so it kind of breaks the chain. But I decided that what made a lot more sense to me was that skills could trigger effects. You can have an effect at the beginning of the skill, maybe like a buff or a movement speed change. You can have a trigger effect during the skill, like every 0.5 seconds you shoot a projectile or something, or at the end of the skill. You can basically, you're coding the skill to trigger effects. Effects are the reusable components, like create projectile, in this case a fireball, or I mean anything. You could create, like, if I had like a really kick-ass axe, and while I was whirlwinding around, every enemy I hit, I deal damage to the enemy. I create a puddle of fire at the enemy's feet, and I add a movement speed slow to the enemy for like 0.2 seconds. So it just constantly gets snared each time I hit, with fire dropped at its feet and damage taken. All I'd have to do is code that is, during the skill, every 0.5 seconds, trigger these 3 effects. And one of those effects will create a world, what I'm calling the world object, which is detached from the player or the enemy, where it just puts fire on the ground there. And then you just say get tree, add child to the tree root node. So it's a little bit complicated, I'll admit that. Like, I kind of went just a bit off the rails on all of the crazy stuff you can do, but I might rewrite some of it, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. At this point, I can create a new enemy, code the skill to it, add any new effects that I need, add new movement resources if I need new movement resources, otherwise I can reuse existing ones, and the enemy will just be done. Like, almost everything can be handled in the inspector, and just plugging in these components. It's just really, really simple to create new things now and handle new AI because of this crazy work I did on all of these components. And just a quick example of what like the liches will look like. So obviously the code's not there. They're shooting fireballs, one hit me, and then they'll just, like, this is it. They move around and they shoot fireballs. It's a very simple enemy, very simple. There's an enemy in Hades very similar to this, the little flying ghost thing. Like I said, I'm trying to make a game. I mean, I want combat to be similar to Hades, because Hades is honestly like my favorite action game. And yeah, as of right now, my plan, I do want to talk about the kick-ass thing about the take damage handler that I changed. So there's this guy, this absolute badass named Drink Soda Bad. I had a problem where, let's see if I can find my fireball scene. Oh, it's right here. So I had a problem. So my fireball, every my player has to have a collision area at its feet. Enemies have to have collision areas at their feet. Otherwise, whenever they go up to a wall, they'll stop way before they actually go up to... Why did I turn red all of a sudden? I gotta figure out what this camera's doing. You want the player to be able to, like, overlap with the wall where its torso is, and only the feet can't go through the wall. And the same as if there's a bottom wall, you want the feet to go all the way to where the collision is, but you don't want to, like, go past it. So I couldn't have my collision area in the middle of my player. As a result, the fireball, whenever it hits the middle of the player, once again, it has to have that same offset. The offset of where it's searching for that collision area needs to be at the feet. And this is actually a problem in Stardew Valley. Eric Brown, if you're watching this, I'm sure you're a big fan. If there's, like, bats, the bat collision area with the player, it doesn't make any sense. You can end up colliding with the bat whenever it just touches the bottom of your feet. Meanwhile, whenever it's coming from top it has to still go all the way through you and hit the top of your feet collision area before it does damage, because he did not put the collision area of the bat offset. And that's why it's way easier to kill flying things when they're above you in Stardew Valley. So you want to go under them because it's way harder for them to hit you. So anyway, I was trying to handle this because what happens is if the fireball churns, if I had an offset collision, that collision would also churn with the fireball. And I didn't like that. So I posted, and Drink Soda Bad says, yeah, you can do it. You know, I was looking for an elegant solution. Obviously, I can manually push it back. He said, yeah, you could do it that dirty way by manually pushing it back. Or there's no reason that your player can't just have an area 2D for taking damage. So you have your collision for hitting walls and things and other enemies and stuff, but then you have an area 2D for taking damage. It blew my frickin' mind. Of course I can have a second area 2D. And on top of that, because the take damage handler is just a node 2D, I could just change it to an area 2D, and then you're forced, whenever you add a take damage handler, to add a collision shape and give it something, and that's where the thing takes damage. So I did that. So you can see, oh my god, this totally needs to be fixed. So now my take damage handler has this collision shape, and you can, let me get rid of you. Yeah. So in the center, this is where my take damage is, and then the bottom is actually collision for walls and things. So thank you, Drink Soda Bad. You're awesome. This is going to be incredibly helpful. I thought I was going to have to offset literally everything. Every weapon swing, everything would have to be offset by the collision shape at your feet thing. Nope. This is a much more elegant and perfect solution. So, oh, and on top of that, whenever something was taking damage, I was saying, okay, well, you're obviously the character body. If you have a component manager, which I'm assuming you have to have your component manager call take damage on the take damage handler. I hated that. I hated making the assumption that it was there. Now, when I hit something, what I'm actually hitting is the take damage handler. So I can directly call take damage on the take damage handler for whatever something that deals damage collided with. So, yeah, it was brilliant. And, yeah, that's about it. As for updates, what I'm going to do going forward here, I'd like to get a couple more enemies, a couple more interesting things, get my ranged attack working, get an actual health pool that when it goes away you die, and then actually create a mini boss with maybe like 5 or 6 skills. And then I'll basically do like 4 waves of enemies. If I kill them all, then I fight the mini boss. If I kill it, I can actually answer my own question of, is the combat fun? Did I make something as fun as Hades? And if I did, then I'm much more confident that this game is really going to work. Then I'll start working on the other parts of the game, the farming, the social stuff. I've already got the dialogue working. So yeah, pretty excited. I'm really happy with how I handled this whole component manager thing and getting everything set up. And yeah, if anybody needs like more information on that, like a big tutorial on how to do sort of that much more complicated composition framework, I'd be happy to do that. I got some great feedback on my last tutorial that it was pretty low quality. I know that now, but yeah, going forward, this has been great. Hopefully in a week I'll do another update video. Thanks.